Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Ship Overviews. We're going to be going on to the Gothic class cruiser. Now, I just made a video about the lunar cruiser talking to you all about how it is basically the great Gerber multi-tool of the Imperial Navy. You can do anything with a lunar. You can, slices it, dices it, makes julienne fries. Now we're going to start moving on to the sibling vessels of the lunar, which are significantly more specialized. The Gothic class cruiser is effectively what happens if you pull off the weapons batteries of the lunar and slap on 2 more lances. And what you get is effectively a dedicated anti-ship system. Now, like the Imperial lunar cruiser, this one is actually very common as well, which is rather unusual for a lore perspective because lances are considered to be, very powerful and highly advanced weapons, and nobody attributes, high technology with the Imperium. However, the Gothic class cruiser has a very, very important element to the Imperial Navy as a whole because it gives a defined and effective punch that is really good at taking out other ships of equal or greater size to itself. So while the Lunar is more of a generalist, good at attacking multiple different targets, the Gothic class cruiser is really focused on taking on targets that are its size or larger. At the same time, it's not bad against taking out smaller vessels, but when you have knocked down the shields of an enemy battleship, really what you're hoping for is a full-on broadside from a Gothic to really bring the damage home. Looking at its stats, you can see a standard Imperial cruiser stat line with 8 hits, 20 centimeter movement, 45-degree turns, 2 shields, 6 up front armor, 5 up side and rear armor, and 2 turrets. But in the weapons, you'll notice that it has 4 lances, both port and starboard, and prow torpedoes with no options for upgrades. This vessel is a specialist vessel. This vessel is also one of the very few Imperial Navy cruisers that does well on its own, mostly because this is a ship that the enemy cannot ignore. The vessel is walking down the board, either dumping out torpedoes from the front or dumping out a huge salvo of lances from the side. The enemy can't ignore this unless they are Eldar, because 4 lances is a threat to virtually everything in the game. Even battleships run the risk of losing their shields from one solid salvo of a locked-on Gothic. These vessels are also typically one of the very first things that your enemy shoots to pieces because, rightfully so, they're afraid of them. And very well they should be. Gothics at 180 points, the same cost as a lunar, pack an incredible punch for their point cost. Now, a lot of people are going to go, well, why in the world am I going to take a lunar when I could take a Gothic? And I've heard that argument many times. And here's the number one reason: no weapons batteries. And people who do not understand the value of weapons batteries regularly make the mistake of just maximizing lances. Well, the first problem is, while lances are very, very useful, they're never in as high quantity as weapons batteries, and given that this is a game about facing and positioning, you will always have the potential to do more damage with weapons batteries than lances. Lances are just more reliable. Like all of the other standard cruisers of the Imperial Navy, the Gothic works very well in a squadron, especially with another lunar, or if you are insane, another Gothic, simply because nobody can ignore a strength 8 lance to the face. So what I personally like to use the Gothic for when I am using it is I have it established on the flank of the board coming in from the side, making the enemy have to pay attention to this cruiser that is nothing more than a giant middle finger to pretty much everything they have on the board. They have to pay attention to it. They have to dedicate resources to engaging it. Meanwhile, the rest of my fleet is able to function with a little more flexibility because the enemy is distracted by the Gothic. Now, if there are other tactics which are hunter-killer tactics for the Gothic, squadroning it with a lunar, or squadroning it with another Gothic, or even giving it a dominator buddy, or even putting it with a dictator as a heavy escort to prevent enemy cruisers from getting too close to your carriers. This vessel is very much a flexible with is very flexible within the meta, but it usually has very specialized roles because people tend to use it to knock out other cruiser or larger vessels. So the Gothic is ultimately a very, very, very useful vessel, but it has very dire weaknesses. The first and most significant weakness is everyone recognizes a Gothic. When they see it on the board, they know what it is and they know they want to kill it. Because, frankly, the more useful an individual ship is, the more they're going to want to knock it out of knock it out of your toolkit. The other weakness is there's not a single weapons battery on this thing to save its life, which means ultimately against Necrons and against Eldar, you're going to have a lot of problems. Now, you're mentioning, wait, why Necrons? Why is this thing weak against Necrons? Because the Necrons, if they encounter a large number of Gothics, they have less of a reason to fear going on Brace for Impact. When they go on Brace for Impact, the chance of you hitting is the exact same as your lances. So shrug, okay, I'll Brace for Impact. I suddenly have a 2-up save. Now, if you have a lack of weapons batteries, suddenly that becomes a advantage for the Necron player as opposed to a weakness. And that's something that people regularly don't understand about Necrons. They actually fear weapons batteries just as much as they fear lances. But that we'll get onto in the Necron fleet overview sometime in the future. Overall, very few fleets of the Imperial Navy are go out there without a Gothic somewhere in it. I use them, you use them, your grandmother uses them. They're just a phenomenal hammer to the anvil that is the Imperial Navy itself. Now, if you have any other opinions about how this ship can be used or other tactical recommendations for this ship, by all means comment about it down below. And I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you all again soon.